It is now out there from insider Jordan Schultz that Kaden Proctor visited with the Browns on Thursday, folks. A real possibility for Cleveland, who owns the 6th overall pick.
When ESPN-linked names start getting attached to the 6th pick, and those names are not the clean, obvious blue-chip guys people were hoping for, you can feel the panic building. This is not one of those years where the Browns can afford to get cute. This is not one of those years where you can talk yourself into upside just because a guy is big and athletic. When you are picking 6th overall, that means your season went badly enough that you earned a premium pick. And premium picks are supposed to clean up major mistakes, not create brand new ones. That is why the latest Browns buzz feels dangerous, because it sounds like the front office might be talking itself into a risk at exactly the wrong time.
If you're telling me we would look at that list of players available, stay at 6, and take Proctor, the Browns fans are going to crash out. We're going to lose it. Especially. And I know you don't draft for the fans. You do what your organization believes is the best thing to lead to winning. I get it. Fans don't know everything.
The biggest reason people are nervous is simple. The names being floated do not all feel equal. If you tell Browns fans there is real interest in a polished, high-floor player like Carnell Tate, most people at least understand the logic. If you say Cleveland is looking hard at an offensive lineman because left tackle is a giant need, fans will not love it, but they will at least understand why. But once the Kaden Proctor noise starts getting loud, that is when people start losing patience. Because now it sounds like Cleveland might be willing to pass on cleaner, safer, more proven prospects at 6 for a player who still comes with major questions. And the second you hear phrases like, "He can be great if he wants to be," you should get nervous. Real nervous. At pick 6, nobody wants to hear about what a guy might become if everything lines up perfectly. Fans want to hear that he already looks like a monster, already plays like a top pick, and already gives you confidence he can anchor your line for years.
Do what your organization believes is the best thing to lead to winning. I get it. Fans don't know everything. But if Carnell Tate is there at 6 and they take Proctor, get ready for the fan reaction. I don't think Barry and Haslam could take the heat, quite frankly, if they straight up passed on Carnell Tate.
Here's the part nobody's talking about. The wording around Proctor is almost worse than the scouting report itself, because when evaluators say a guy can be special if he wants to be, that tells you there is something they do not fully trust. Maybe it is consistency, maybe it is effort, maybe it is conditioning. Maybe it is the fact that after multiple years of starting, you are still describing him more through traits than performance. That is a red flag. Not a tiny one either, a huge one. Because if a player has already had years of high-level college football and the biggest thing you still talk about is what he could become, then why are we acting like this is the right spot to take him? This is not pick 21. This is not a second-round swing. This is 6th overall. There is supposed to be a difference.
Intentionally being dumb. What I think their rationale is it's the biggest need for Cleveland, right? Left tackle. And Kaden Proctor started 40 games at left tackle for 3 years. He's durable in that sense.
And that difference matters even more because of the names Cleveland could be passing on. That is what makes this whole thing feel so stressful. Browns fans are not just reacting to Proctor in a vacuum. They are reacting to the idea of passing on players like Caleb Downs, Jeremiah Love, David Bailey, Reuben Bain, or Carnell Tate if he is still there. That is what makes the whole thing feel like a possible disaster before the card is even handed in. If you are talking about taking a risk on a tackle while premium playmakers and safer high-end talents are staring you in the face, then you had better be absolutely sure. Not kind of sure, not we like his movement skills, not he has upside, absolutely sure. And right now, the reporting around Cleveland does not make this feel like a franchise with total conviction. It feels more like a team trying to justify a need pick. This is where it gets dangerous, because front offices fall in love with traits all the time. Big frame, long arms, good feet, rare movement, freak athlete. You hear the same words every single draft season, and sometimes it works. Sometimes those traits become stars once NFL coaching refines the rest. But sometimes teams convince themselves they are smarter than everybody else. Sometimes they convince themselves they can fix what other people could not. And that is how you end up with first-round headaches instead of first-round solutions. The Browns cannot afford another one of those. Not right now. Not with all the pressure on this regime. Not with the offense still full of question marks, and not with a fan base already prepared to explode if they pass on the wrong guy. Now, to be fair, you can understand why Cleveland is even having these conversations. Left tackle is not a small issue. It is a giant issue. You cannot build a serious offense while pretending that blindside protection is optional. If the Browns really believe they are only a few offensive pieces away, then of course they're going to think long and hard about tackling that problem early. And yes, Proctor has experience. Yes, he has size. Yes, if you lined up all the tools on paper, you could talk yourself into the dream version of him becoming a franchise tackle. That's the pitch. That's the fantasy. But the draft is about more than fantasy. It's about balancing need, value, floor, ceiling, and timing. And at 6, timing matters a lot. The Browns need someone who helps justify the spot immediately, even if his ceiling is not the most exciting in the entire class. That is why Carnell Tate keeps hovering over this whole discussion like a ghost, because Tate feels like the kind of pick fans can process. He fills a real need. He has great hands. He has almost no drop issues. He looks like the kind of receiver who walks into the league and just becomes productive. Maybe he is not some wild, chaotic, boom or bust prospect. Maybe he's just really good at football. And sometimes that's exactly what a team drafting 6th needs. A guy with a strong floor, clean projection, and instant utility. If Cleveland passes on that type of player for a riskier tackle profile, then the organization better be ready for the backlash, because it will be brutal.
We know a couple things. One, Andrew Berry does not care, apparently, if you play right tackle or left tackle. He said the job description is the same. And Fano is an immediate starter at offensive tackle, at offensive guard.
Here's the part nobody is talking about. The Browns are in the worst possible draft position mentally. They are high enough to grab a premium player, but needy enough to talk themselves into reaching. That is a dangerous combination. When you are picking in the 20s, reaching on need happens all the time because the board is flatter. When you are picking 6th, the board is supposed to save you from yourself. A top 6 pick should feel like a blessing, even if the season that got you there was ugly. But for Cleveland, it feels like they might use that blessing to overthink themselves into trouble. And if that happens, fans are not going to shrug it off and say, well, let's see in 3 years. They are going to lose it on draft night. And honestly, the one thing that would make this more understandable is a trade down. If the Browns are locked in on taking a tackle they know the public will view as a reach, then move down. Get assets. Let the board come to you. Reduce the pressure on the player and on the organization. That is common sense. If you are passing on players graded higher by most evaluators, then you should at least be getting something back for it. That is why so many people are saying the same thing right now. If you love Proctor or Monroe Freeling that much, fine. But do not sit at 6 and pretend value does not matter. Trade back into the teens, pick up more draft capital, and then make your swing. At least then the logic feels cleaner. This is where young front offices usually make a mistake. They start drafting like every need is an emergency. It is not. Some needs can be patched for a year. Some can be attacked in round 2. Some can be handled through veterans. Not every problem must be solved with the first pick, especially if the board is offering you players who are simply better. And Cleveland has to be smart about that, because there is a difference between attacking left tackle and panicking about left tackle. If the better football player is a receiver or a defender, then maybe you take the better football player and solve tackle another way. That is how good teams draft. They do not let desperation make the decision for them. Now, the Spencer Fano angle is interesting because that one at least feels more defensible. If you are going to sell me on a lineman at 6, it helps if the player sounds versatile, durable, technically solid, and more proven in the little things. Fano has the kind of profile that front offices love because he gives them options. Tackle, guard, maybe even center flexibility in a pinch. Good athlete, reliable, durable. That is a much easier sell than, trust us, this giant dude can become great if the light fully turns on. Fano still might not be the perfect pick at 6, depending on who is there, but at least the argument feels rooted in football instead of raw projection. If Cleveland really is leaning line at 6, then Fano makes more sense as the pick fans could talk themselves into, even if they are not thrilled. Monroe Freeling is another one where the upside talk at least matches the timeline. If a guy has only really had 1 full year as a starter, then okay, sure, the upside conversation makes sense. There is still obvious growth ahead, there is still some mystery in a good way. But again, that brings you back to the same conclusion. If you are talking about these developmental or semi-developmental tackle types, then why are you picking at 6? Why are you not moving down? Why are you not collecting extra value? That is what makes the Browns rumors feel unsettling. It's not just that they like tackles, it's that they may like them too much at exactly the spot where restraint is supposed to matter. And at the same time, there is one fair argument in Cleveland's favor. Left tackle is a premium position. It may actually be more important than wide receiver in some builds. If the Browns truly believe one of these tackles is a future high-end answer and not just a decent starter, then you can at least understand why they are tempted. That is the strongest case. Solve the bigger structural problem, protect the quarterback, stabilize the offense, build from the line out. That logic is not crazy. The problem is, the prospects being discussed don't sound clean enough to make people comfortable at 6. That's the issue, not the position, the spot. And if that fear becomes reality on draft night, this is going to be one of those moments Browns fans remember instantly. Not because the season was already bad enough to land them at 6, but because having a top 6 pick is supposed to be the moment you finally stop making life harder on yourself. If Cleveland turns that gift into another gamble, then yes, they are in trouble. And not just before the 2026 NFL Draft. They'll be in trouble because they once again had a chance to make the obvious smart move and tried to be the smartest guys in the room.